Are we making it on our Saturday? I almost said Sunday, but today's Saturday. Wow. A lot of you guys out on fleets. Where are you guys going to shoot that structure? Have you guys even left yet? Yeah, it's fair enough, Crystal. So for these, like the best way I usually do these are the way I like to do them is to start with kind of a question or a prompt from you guys for story time, just because I'm not sure what kind of thing you all might be interested in hearing or listening to. I will start with um, quick thing from last night, as I think a lot of you all know, we were doing the uh, anniversary kind of memorial fleet for uh, an Ominet's passing. So we got to kill Asher's Titan last night and raised, I believe the number was 21,000 US dollars for cancer research. 21 or 22, I can't remember what somebody said in one of the channels. So all that was done last night. And for those of you who are around, we very nearly hit. Uh, well, I should say very nearly hit. We very nearly reinforced the uh, CJ Keepstar. I should have gotten a screenshot on it, and that was my bad last night. When I was looking at the Keepstar, it actually showed 0% shields because Kunmi kept firing lances from his little armada. Granted, lots of us were firing lances, I was too. But still, it was it was pretty crazy. Yeah, Brisk, he volunteered. Okay, let me think of how the basically the sequence went something like this. He was saying that somebody challenged him, basically Asher, to smash one of his dollies. I like how you guys put that in there. No, we don't bully anybody. He was challenged and what's the word? Encouraged to smash one of his dollies. Uh, voluntold, Crystal. Ooh, I like that. He was voluntold, and he said, I won't do this for less than $1,000. And not only was there one person who said, "Boom, done. Here's $1,000." Three of y'all nerds did that. He raised $3,000 to smash that dolly of his with a hammer, I believe. He did that. Oh, Mrs. Brisk is the one who smashed it. I missed that. Nice. Fair enough. As I understand, she hates this damn thing. So that's got to be poetic justice and true enjoyment from her. Somebody else did donate 2,000. I did see that. I wasn't sure, honestly, if that was in the like the same part of it or if that was a separate piece. I missed that section of the stream. It was all so he got 5,000 for that. Nice. I've got to go back and watch that video myself because I did not get a chance to see it, but I'm gonna go and watch that as well. Because yeah, I mean we don't get to DD Brisk in game anymore because CCP changed a lot of those mechanics. So uh, there we go. That's what we did. Brisk's wife DD'd his dolly. There we go. Um, and yes, already replaced. He sent us a screenshot of the new box he got literally this morning. He's still got to build it, make it, paint it, whatever, but he's got a new one. Yeah, I've seen a couple people, in Fleet and Elysium say that the total was 22. I couldn't remember if it was 21,000 or 22,000 last night. The ping that I recall seeing in the message was more than the previous 2 years combined. So, uh, what is a what is a dolly? So the dolly is his figurines. It's just a honestly, yeah, I'm not sure if that's a troll question from you or if that's an American idiom, but dolly is just a um, it's a hostile way of referring to a figurine or something like that. It's usually referred to like for a small child. It would be something you give to a small child. Somebody kept saying lion. I don't know shit about 40K, so I don't know. Oh, Dumore's got a picture. That's from a Discord channel there that might not link for you depending on Discords that you're in. Okay, so everybody pretty much should be able to see that. LBB, that's pretty good. We'll have to make sure to point that out to Briss that they raised 40K for noms. Yeah, that might take a little bit of the sting out of that one. Okay, so now that we've done all that, all right, there's a colon link that. I'm actually gonna put that in the Fleet MLTD so I can have it. Uh, she can call the hammer the hammer 40K. I like it. Since most of you guys are out on other fleets there's a few people in the one that I've got up. That's the videos of these previous histories that I've done. If you guys are interested in watching some of those, I do have more than 20 of them now. This is the 21st as I've counted them up with various special guests over the years, and uh, we did the Meet the Directors thing over Christmas this last year. So just various random videos are linked in there. Okay, that was kind of my intro from last night. So, question for story time for you guys. What stories would you like to hear? You can put it again. I'm looking at Elysium, and I've got the fleet up as well. Yeah, Asher did lose his levy last night. That was a lot of fun. And I clearly was using the wrong kind of ammo when I was shooting his levy with my rag. Yeah, I only did like 30K damage to him. I was kind of pissed that Hyper beat me like 2.5 times. I was like, fuck, man. Pitch you a story. Yeah, sure. Who is a nominate? That's a good point. So we lost Nominate a few years ago to cancer, which is of course why we all have the ubiquitous fuck cancer. He's not a first member of our tribe that we've lost. He will not be the last one either, unfortunately. This is one of those cases to where, we're all getting older. It happens. But Innominate was a member of the CSM. He ran a lot of our IT infrastructure, was doing a whole bunch of things like that. Long time Ilum member, long time director in Karma Fleet itself. So a lot of us have known him for many, many years. I got a chance to meet him in Vegas about a year before he passed. So we it's just one of those things of he was a very well-known guy among KF especially, and around Eve for his time as a CSM, do all those kind of pieces. Favorite Rooks and Kings. So my favorite Rooks and Kings video is, yeah, it's probably the false pause one. So back in the day, this is 10 years ago now, a Hictor bubble and a Dictor bubble and the shield on a pause or a tower or a stick were all basically the same color. So if you had your graphics settings on low, you couldn't tell them apart. They were all this kind of a pale blue color. Now today they're different colors. Like Hictor bubbles are kind of a reddish orange, and interdictor bubbles are blue, right? But they were all the same color back then. And so what Rooks and Kings did is they put a tower out and they put the shield on the tower. Now, the shield means that you cannot fire out of it. So if your ship was inside the shield on a pause, you can't target anybody on the outside of the pause, and you can't fire on the outside of the pause. So what Rooks and King did is they took a Hictor and they put the Hictor on the stick, like at 0. They really set this up. They had it perfectly positioned. And then they got a max skilled Hictor pilot with this, because as you skill up in the Hictor, the bubble gets larger, the radius gets larger. And so a max skilled Hictor pilot at 0 on the tower when it's arranged just right looks exactly like what a pause shield should look like. And so they put this Hictor at 0 and they put a fleet inside, air quotes, inside the shield on it. I think they were, I don't remember, they were battleships. I don't remember what they were, but they had a battleship fleet there. Yeah, not important. They had a battleship fleet there. And the enemy showed up, right? Rooks King's enemy showed up, and they're just like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna have to siege this tower. And then Rooks and King starts firing on them. And they're like, what the hell? And this has all been recorded. Their comms have been recording everything. And they're all like, what the hell's going on here? How are they doing this? This is an exploit. Make sure somebody's videoing this, right? The whole thing. Well, it wasn't an exploit. It was the fact that the Hictor bubble was the same color as the pause shield bubble. And so it looked like they were inside the pause shield and were of no threat to this fleet, and they just smashed them. That's probably my favorite video.
Hi, Ranger.
Yeah, they're right. Um, a second one of the Rooks and Kings. It's a really well done video, and it just pissed everybody off. So this one with the pause and Hictor bubble, everybody's like, that's actually pretty clever. That was no, I don't think anybody, the people who died, were probably pissed, but the rest of us were like, good on you, Rooks King. That was pretty good. The one that really made the entire community stand up and go, what the fuck, is when they found the Rooks and Kings actually found an exploit in capital sites in high tier wormholes. And basically there was a bug. It's an actual bug. CCP acknowledged there was a bug with this. There was a bug that if you got the tracking rating on a gun, now this had to be a turret, whether it was a hybrid or projectile, it doesn't matter. It had to be a turret. If you had the tracking rating to show negative, it broke the calculation and it would reset the tracking rating to infinite. So if your tracking rating went negative, Eve treated that as an infinite value, which means that they could sit with battleships and blasters and just shoot frigates at like 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers, and hit them for full damage. And so this group or groups was just massacring and just printing ISK out of capitals. These were capital sites in high level wormholes. Now you needed a specific wormhole, you needed a tracking penalty wormhole, and then they would apply remote tracking disruptors to it as well. And that's how it actually worked. And so when that video came out, everybody was up in arms, and CCP fixed that. So you cannot bring the tracking value negative to cause that to occur again. Very similar to the unprobable Slippery Pete's. It's the same kind of an idea. So Slippery Pete's was a Tengu doctrine. They were railgoos, we used to call them, because they had railguns on them. So they were railgun Tengus. We used to call them railgoos. A lot of people called them Slippery Pete's. That was another name for them. And what would happen is, back in the day, you had an ECM module, right? Well, you had an ECCM, right? The electronic countermeasures, the countermeasures. And what you could do is you could get your signature radius to be so small that you could not be probed down. And so the way that combat probing works, we've actually got a class in university on this, is it's based on the sensor strength of the person trying to find you and the signature radius of the ship. That's why smaller ships are harder to find. Scanning down Titans, super easy. Like a day one newbie can do that. But these are cruisers, right? T3Cs are cruisers. And so if you got this value small enough, you could not be probed down, even if you used Virtue probes. So these are Virtue implants. These implants still exist. They're not used terribly much anymore because of the changes to boosting. When boosting was an off-grid thing, you would hunt fleet boosters with Virtue probes. And as somebody who used to be a off-grid booster, you would just be mashing your D-scan the entire time a fleet was out looking for combat probes because they were trying to kill you. And they'd use Virtue probers to do that. But even Virtue probers could not grab these fleets. And so what we did is we got agents of the Black Hand to infiltrate these fleets, and they would just disable this ECCM module. Well, the modules fit. So here's the thing. When your ship dies, it shows the module. It doesn't show whether the module was active or even online. It just shows it was fitted. And so what we would do is we would have our Black Hand operatives be in those fleets, and they would just turn theirs off. And so we could probe them down and land on the fleet and engage it. And that's how we dealt with it. Now, CCP did eventually, that mechanic lasted for a while, but CCP did eventually rewrite the back end so you cannot do that anymore. You can always probe somebody down if you've got high enough combat skills with it, high enough combat probing skills, right? Those groups of skills for it. You can scan down any ship. So it's not possible to be unprobable like it was back in the old days. Lauren, this is yeah, I mean, is it a Black Hand secret? No. We've actually told this story many, many times, but yeah, it's an old trick, and it doesn't work anymore because you can't. Well, I mean, I guess it still does, but it's not like you can't probe those ships down because CCP changed that background mechanic. Yeah, some days I miss the old boosts as well. I'll admit the ones that I miss was the old mining boost because that was a great thing. You could just get a Rorqual, you'd put it in a pause, you'd open up your fleet. You'd go. siege green on it, turn on all of your boosts, and you'd walk away and go home. Sorry, go home. You'd go to work, and you could boost an entire system that way. And that's how most of us used to do it. Because what you could do with the old boosts is A, you didn't need to be on grid, and B, it was a very hierarchical system. So you needed 6 boosters to run an old fleet. You would put 1 in each wing command position, and you'd put 1 in the fleet boosting command position. So the FCs of the fleets is funny. They tended not to be the fleet, the highest fleet position. That was usually a booster. The FC was usually somewhere else in the fleet. They had full control of it and everything. There's another mechanic that allows you to do that. But yeah, so you'd put all the boosters. You needed 6 of them, 5 wing boosters, and then 1 fleet booster. And you needed to have a squad leader who could transmit the boost down to all 10 members of the squad. So what you would do when you first join the fleet is the FCs would ask, who's got wing command 5? Who's going to be the boosters? And they would be put into the wing command positions. And then who's got the... Does anybody remember what the old skill was that allowed you to transfer the skills to like 10 fleet members of your squad? We should just call it squad command. Leadership, so leadership 5. It would do 2 for that. And so you would put anybody with the leadership 5 into each of the squad positions. You'd normally just open it, like you'd put the fleet up, you'd move the wing boosters into position, and then you'd say, okay, if you've got leadership 5, free moves on, take a squad position. And that's actually how we used to do all that. Doesn't really matter today because you have to be on grid for the boosts, and squads aren't limited to 10 people by any means, so it doesn't make any difference. But that's how we used to do that. Yeah, Tig in Fleet there, the glorious days, how much ISK was made back then. Yeah, that old capital escalation exploit, and it was classified as an exploit. Who knows? I think if you said trillions was printed from that, that's not an unreasonable statement. We're not sure how long that lasted, but it was, months and months and months at least. Yeah, getting all the leadership stuff. This is a fun one, talking about leaderships and these kinds of skills. Back in the day when T3Cs were first introduced, if you died in one of them, there were 5 subsystem skills. And if you died in a T3C, you lost 1 level of one of those 5 skills. And it was random, but it was always the highest kind of a thing. So you couldn't get like Caldari offensive down to 0 if you died 5 times. That wasn't the thing. It would take one of the random high skills. But the reason I mentioned the leadership and somebody had the wing command 5 earlier is the old clone grades. Now we've got 2 clone grades now. We've got alpha and omega, and that's it. Back in the day when the slippery Petes were a thing, these T3Cs were first introduced, there were like 20 clone grades. And you would have to pay to cover the skill points on your character. The clone grade alpha covered nothing. I honestly don't even remember how much it was. 1 million, 2 million skill points. Was it just 900K? Okay, sounds right. I thought it was like 1 billion or something. That was free. But anything over that, if you died in your pot, if you were potted, it would basically say what's your current skill point, what clone grade do you have. It would subtract those 2 numbers and it would do some back end math and it would just nuke a skill. And so you'd be sitting on the fleet, and somebody would get potted, and this happened to the FCs all the time, and you'd hear somebody just go, fuck, I lost fleet command 5, and that's like a 30-day skill train. And so they couldn't boost fleets anymore because those corresponded to how many wings you could control. So fleet command, or the highest one, I don't remember if it was fleet command, but I think it was FC5, covered 5 wings. So FC4 only covered 4 wings. And so that person, there's no injectors back then. Skill injectors did not exist with this. And so that alt, whoever that was, couldn't be used to boost a 256 man fleet anymore. For 30 days or whatever it took them to train it, depending on implants and neural remaps and all that kind of stuff. Uh, Sino Veldred, yeah. So back in the day, Dormammu and I come from the same era of Eve to when. So Sinos today can only be lit on a very small handful of ships. It's a very, very small handful of ships. Back at this point in time, again, this is clone grades, it's all this kind of stuff. You could actually do it on, we call them noob ships, but it's those Corvettes. Like when you first come into the game, or you could do it anywhere, even if you've got a regular ship. Like it says board your Corvette or board my Corvette or whatever that button is. So the Velotor was one of those, and if you got it to Sino 4, you could put enough ozone in it with some cargo expanders to light one Sino. Very similar to a Venture industrial Sino today, but these were regular standard Sinos, so anything could jump to them. And so a lot of us had these seeded around Eve when that change was made to where basically you could only light Sinos. A lot of times they're called hard Sinos, but it's the standard Sino, right? There's three Sinos. There are industrial Sinos, there are covert Sinos, and then there are just regular, normal, standard Sinos. And so everybody who was moving around back then, you would just have stockpiles of liquid ozone and Sino modules, and probably expanded cargo holds depending what your skills and everything were. Different noob ships could need different configurations on them. A lot of us used Velators because you could squeeze just enough ozone into it. You didn't have to get Sino 5 to do that. If you had Sino 5, it was easier because they use each level of the Sino skill uses less ozone, is why that matters. And so you could just cram it in there. And so you would go in and you would have dozens or hundreds of these Sino ships just spread all over the place. I remember when CCP made that change to where all of those noob ship Sinos became utterly useless. I was just like, God, do I care? And I didn't. I think I trashed most of them remotely. I was just like, right click, trash, whatever. I'm gonna have to fly out there with a recon anyways. Fuck this. BB, it's still in the middle of note. That's awesome. Yeah, this is also something that when you look at clone grades as well, the other uh, piece that still exists is the neuro remaps, the neural remaps kind of piece. It's something that a lot of us have been like, seems to be what the hell, man? What's the point of this? But it's still there. So this is like things like the social and the um, willpower and all of those kind of things, right? There's 5 of them. And so each skill has a primary and a secondary skill to it. And if you've got a implant or a neural remap that's in those, right, your skill training is higher. And so this still exists from the very beginning of Eve. It's one of the handful of those mechanics that is still around today. Yeah, they changed the T3Cs as well. Like there were 5 subsystems back then. There are 4 subsystems now. And I know you guys will love this. So I didn't lose this ship. I just didn't care, and it was one of my old off-grid boosters. I just didn't give a shit enough to go out and get it when that changed. And so I've still got it. I think it's a Tengu. It's either a Tengu or a Loki. I can't remember if I had configured it for skirmish or shield pieces, but I've still got one that's got 5 subsystems in it because I never updated it. Yeah, a couple people were talking in Fleet there. The old T3Cs being OP, they absolutely were. When they first came out, Um, they were nuts. Oh, research agents. Yeah. So research agents is just like a regular mission running agent kind of a thing. They still exist. You can still use them. You still get them, right? And what they were used for at the beginning is that's how you got blueprints. But specifically, it's how you got T2 BPOs. Now, T2 BPOs don't exist as a new seeded item. They still are around. You can still get them. People still sell them. People still use them. But you can't get new ones. There's just those from 15 plus years ago. They brought in the current, air quotes, current invention system in like 2008 or something like that. 2009. I don't remember when that came in. But before that, you would go to these R&D agents, and that's how you got T2 BPOs. Those agents still exist. You get research points for them, which you can get data cores. You have to fly out to them, interact with them just like any other kind of an agent, a mission running agent. There's those in high sec, they're in low sec, there's multiple levels of them. Most of us use level 3 or level 4 because they're the only ones that really matter. And the higher the level, the more of those research points you get I'm sure it's every hour, it's RP per hour. And then you fly up to them, right? You interact with them, and it just says buy data cores, and it's like, well, it's going to cost you this much RP. It's like doing an LP exchange, right? You got some loyalty points from doing incursions or whatever it is, right? You go and you trade them in. It's the exact same kind of mechanic, same basic idea. It's just the only thing you get from these people are data cores. And yeah, so nowadays they're not the sole source of data cores, so they're not as useful as they used to be. Well, obviously that's the case. There's the only way to get T2 BPOs. But even after that, once inventions were a thing, they were still source of data cores. You can get data cores in loot drops and all other kind of places now, so it's not nearly as big of a thing. Yeah, you can get them from LP and all that kind of stuff. So there were multiple ways to get them, but the R&D agents 15 plus years ago was how you got the T2 BPOs. We all thought a number of years ago, so inventions had been a thing, and CSB mentioned something about T2 BPOs, and what a lot of us thought, because they changed the way, okay, disjointed story here. Okay, let's go back. So inventions are a thing, and you use a BPC, right? You do the invention on a BPC. Well, back in the day, to get the best results for an invention, you wanted the highest run number that you could get. So you wanted 200 runs or 50 runs on that BPC, whatever the maximum was. It's not the case now, but it was back then. And when CCP changed that to where the run count didn't matter, a lot of us thought, oh, well, they're going to change the T2 BPOs to extremely high run count BPCs, right? To just kind of get rid of them because it was really hard to compete, but they didn't. So the BPOs still exist. Do locators still work? Yes, they do. So locator agents, just like R&D agents, it's a special subtype of them. I believe they're security agents. I believe they fall in the security category. Uh, they allow you to, every few minutes, it depends on the level of agent, to give them a name, and they will tell you what system that person was in when you ran the trace. And it takes a few minutes to run this trace. So you can't just track somebody in real time, technically, because there's always a delay between when you submit it to when you get it. Uh, and whoever programmed it had a sense of humor. It's really fun because you'll get an in-game message for it, and it says, "I found your sleaze bag." It actually says that. "I found your sleaze bag. They are," and then it will give you a system name. But that's what a locator does. So yeah, are they still a thing? Absolutely, they are. They're just high-level agents. Again, they're high sec, low sec. They're just high-level agents. Yeah, I'm looking at Fleet. Tig made an excellent um, addition in there. The T2 BPOs I mentioned from the R&D agents, they were absolutely a lottery. This was the source of the T20 controversy, or T20 disaster, you may call it. Una, where do you even see your data cores? I'm not sure what you mean by that, man. Like the data core is just an item. It's just an item
No,
that
I
you have in
mean,
here.
where do you see your R&D agent and how many data
Oh,
cores they have?
yeah.
It used to be in the wallet, I think, but no idea where it's now.
I honestly don't know. Industry tab research, according to Proximus. I
Ah,
will
thank you.
admit I do have R&D agents on two of my alts. In fact, I went and collected mine like a week ago, and I linked their locations in the in-game notepad, and I've used that for like 10 years. So fuck if I know where those are.
Yeah, for 500,000 RP on all of them, whatever that means.
That's a pretty good number of data cores. It depends on what like the exact number you got, but you're talking thousands of data cores for that.
Yeah, too much effort to go pick it up.
Yeah, I do it like once a year at the most. I usually do it in the spring. I didn't this last spring because whatever. So I just did mine like a week ago. Yeah, I think it's 100 RP for data core. I think, but I don't want to say that for sure because I'll admit when I picked mine up, I was just like, whatever, give me. I just typed in, I just maxed out the number and said, gimme. Okay, let me make sure I didn't miss any questions like that. I did miss a little thing from BP. He's got a good point on there. If you've got the R&D agents, even if you go AFK, even if your account goes alpha, those R&D still does tick up. So in principle, you could come back after a break, have a little bit of money. I'm not sure I would go with a nice chunk of change, but it's some token money, depending on the agents that you've got, how long you're gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You might be looking at a couple of 100 million, a billion. I don't know. It depends on how many agents you've got, how long you're gone, all that kind of stuff. I've got 10 agents. I picked mine up. I think it'd been about 18 months. And I sold them to some of the KF guys and I gave them a huge discount because what do I fucking care? But I think I pulled in, like, if I'd actually gave a shit and did market stuff, I would have been able to pull in about 500 million for them. But I was like, you guys can have these for 50% off. I don't care. You paid for the shipping to get them in, and you paid what it cost me to get them, and then I made a little bit of profit. So I was like, I don't fucking care. Okay, Lou, even for you, and I know you're a poor, even for you, like 100 million ISK is nothing, dude. People like that. A chunk of change, lots of quarters. Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
He's rich from all the one ESC donations.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's a question. Let me look at that. So the history between or behind the Tescoon conflict that involved Pravi. So we go way back here. We're gonna go back to um, so Test was not part of the Imperium, but Test was part of DECCO and then part of the CFC. And so right, so the Imperium is like the third branding of our coalition. The original one was called DECCO because at the time we were centered in the region of Declan. That's why it was called DECCO. It was renamed to the CFC at the beginning of the IT war when we went to war against the Alliance IT, literally the letters I and T. They were a Bob descendant. So Bob goes back to the Great War, the first really big war that Goon Swarm was involved in. This is closing in on 20 years ago now. We destroyed Bob. That's where Hargoth comes in. If you've heard that name, Hargoth was instrumental in the destruction of Bob at the time. He was a full director in Bob. He technically got recruitment scammed, kind of, by a goon. Now, we don't do recruitment scanning anymore, right? That's a bad thing, right? You know, wink, wink, nod, nod. Anyways, so what happened to Hargoth? He came in, he knew he was joining a goon corp. Like, he didn't, it's not like he was like, oh my god, you guys are goons. No, he knew this. He'd been in the corp for a couple of weeks. This predates my time in Eve. So this is like third hand, guys. So if anybody's got actual details, it just predates my time in Eve. I've read about it, but anyways, he is in some corp. They're like, okay, you know, they've got all of his stuff. They're about to kick him, and he goes to them and says, hey, I really like you guys. You guys are good guys. I don't want to stay with my current group. And oh, by the way, I have a full director and Band of Brothers Executor Corp. And this is a big deal. And so the Goon Corp is like, oh shit. So they go to Mitani, who was not running the Deco or anything like that. Again, none of that existed, but he was head of the Black Hand. And so they basically organize this whole thing with him. He disbands the Band of Brothers Alliance because if you have a full director, you can do that in the Executive Corp. We make a new alliance called Band of Brothers under Goon control. As far as I know, it's probably on some random ass alt that nobody knows anymore, but it's still under Goon control as far as I know. And that's what kicked off the Great War. So the IT Alliance is a descendant of Bob. So we hate them. They descended further into NC Dot, Northern Coalition Dot, PL, Horde before they died, right? A lot of those people went to those groups. That's kind of where our, you know, get fucked nerds kind of thing comes from. Test was totally separate from this. So we're going against IT. Test is part of DECO and the CFC. They were our allies. IT at the time lived in Fountain. You've probably heard of that region. So we stage a massive war and invasion in Fountain. We go for the headshot in 6 VDT, which is where IT's alliance was staged. There are no citadels back then, guys. This is 15 years ago. Help me on that. Anybody who's around, Doomlord, I think you were playing with that. I believe that war was in 2011. Something like that, maybe 2012. It's around in that time. So we were using, as Doomlord just said in there, we were using outposts. These were the old NPC kind of looking stations. You could put one in a system, just one. The faction forts that you guys might remember, we've got one undocked. If you're undocked in CJ and you look, right, our memorial is a Marginus Fortizar. That citadel is one of the old outposts. So faction Fortizars, when you hear somebody say that, that is one of the old outposts. Yeah, so there were four. There was a Galant, there was one for each race. There was a Galanti, there was Kaldari, Amar, and Minmatar. I'll give you the quick one. The Galanti one was used for offices. The Minmatar one was used for refining. The Amar one was used for building. And the Kaldari one was used for research. So each one had a specialization to it. But you only put one per system. So they're in their old outpost. We go to siege that outpost with it. Shenanigans entail IT is destroyed. We take over the region of Fountain. Tess moves into Fountain. They are still our allies at this point in time. The CFC has been created. They're holding the southern southwestern front, however you want to do it. They're living in Fountain. There's some eventual animosity between Goons and Test, right, coming down with everything. So eventually, right, there's a falling out. Test goes through a couple of leadership changes. Mittens is in charge of the CFC at this point in time. He was in charge of it at the founding of the CFC. He's in charge of it now. And Test becomes the enemy. And from that point on, they have kind of been on our shit list. And so that grudge goes 13 or 14 years now. I'm trying to remember when we had the falling out with him. Um, yeah, I don't remember. Some of these dates start to blur together, but it's well over 10 years that Test has been our enemy and just been on our shit list. Lorraine's got a good addition here in Fleet Chat. He said, I feel like we never really liked Test. Yeah, so Test came from. So Goonswarm comes from the Something Awful forums. That's kind of where Goonswarm, the main corp of Goonswarm was originally consolidated from. It was from the Something Awful forums. That's how you got into Goonswarm. You had to be on those forums and do all those kind of things. Uh, Test did not, we talk about like the Reddit warriors. That's Test, that kind of thing. And so their culture didn't really mesh super well with ours. I think you could say that we were an alliance of convenience at the time, but I again I wasn't in leadership back then. I was a line guy uh, for the 6VDT and IT campaign in the engagement of 6VDT. I was there for that one. We were flying assault frigates. That's what we used for tackle back then. So I was in a Wolf assault frigate fleet. Um, Tie-dye didn't exist back then, and so you guys will love this. I've told this story multiple times, but we jumped into 6VDT. Again, I'm in the tackle fleet. We have everybody there. The nodes are dying. Uh, we're jumping in our capitals. We knew our cap ships and carriers and dreadnoughts. There were no faxes back then. Were coming. Our supers, our titans, right? Everything was coming. Sino goes up, and a massive fleet jumps in. There's not a single blue or green in it. They're all hostile. And we're all just like, shit. The enemies beat us to it. And back then, as it is today, if you're there first and you hold a grid, you usually have an advantage. There have been some exceptions to that. We won't talk about Atioth. Anyways, so we're in 6VDT. Our FC, I don't remember who it was, it's been so many years, turned our fleet into attack. We are lining up on them. We're getting ready to warp in, and now you couldn't tackle supers and titans back then with frigates, but you could carriers and dreadnoughts. So we're literally getting ready to warp in them and engage. And he starts yelling. RFC starts yelling on our comms to break off and to disengage. It turned out it was our fleet. It was our supers, our titans, our capitals. But the lag was so crushingly bad that the only thing that the server was processing was your high sec security status. That's it. And so it wouldn't show you if you were in the same corp with them. It would just show you that high sec security status. So everybody in those fleets was like yellow or neutral. High sec ganking was by far more common back then than it is today. Yeah, reds and all that kind of stuff. It was only showing the security status, that high sec security status. So we very nearly attacked our own capital fleet. That's how bad the lag was in the system. Yeah, I mean, goons shooting blues. As Lorraine just said, we did blow up Asher yesterday. We absolutely did. Um, we got to shoot his levy last night, or this morning, depending on where you are in the Eve world. For me, it was last night. Symbiotes, I agree. I think that's a fair statement there of when you look at how annoying tie-dye is, and it is kind of annoying, the old non-tie-dye was by far worse. because you would just jump into a system and not load. Like your screen would just be black. We used to just call it the black screen of death. And you'd come back and you're back in a station somewhere because your ship loaded grid, you couldn't control it, you died, you got potted, and you did nothing. There were some cases of that in Atioth. There were quite a number of cases of that back in the. So this is going back 6 years now to, we call it Vietnam. A lot of the game calls it World War B or World War B2. Right. This is the Christmas time of 2020 at M2 when that massive super capital fleet jumped in, and some of the kill mails were showing that Titans were jumping in without fits. Nobody jumped a super and a Titan into M2 TAC without a fit. It's just that none of the shit loaded. That's more like what it used to be. Yeah, the Ghost Titans, the Ghost Supers, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yep. That was more like what Eve was like before tie-dye. Is you'd have it by far more likely that some crazy shit like that would occur. Yeah, that absolutely did happen. Yeah, I missed M2. I was there for BTAC R, but I missed the initial part of M2. I was part of the gate camps and everything like that. Yeah, BTAC R was a funny one. This was a so this it predates Citadels again. This was at the beginning of what most of us call the Halloween War because it occurred around Halloween because we are really not clever with how we name things. So most of us call it the Halloween War. And it occurred due to a dropped sovereignty in the system of BTAC R. CSB has forever maintained that the correct button wasn't clicked on the pay sovereignty bill. There's dispute from the other side. I don't know how it went down, but the sovereignty dropped in that system. And that was one of the first really big hell camps that we did. We've done them before. We've done them subsequently to that, right? M2 is an example of that. When Horde died, guys, remember, I was talking to Delta Flux just the other day about this. Remember, we're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of Horde dying, right? 5 November. It's been less than a year since they epically fail cascaded. Uh, that was a siege, a hell camp kind of the old school. It was with a citadel rather than one of the old outposts, same kind of thing. So, all those kind of pieces. And so when we were sitting in BTAC-R, we would go through, we siege that for weeks. And this is when carriers could use, we called them boot carriers, and we were using boot dummies back then. These were sentry carriers and sentry dummies. And so your carrier could use drones. They can only use fighters now. They could use drones and fighters back then. And so what you would do is you would log in the morning before you were going to work. You'd get your carrier on. Again, some people use dummies as well, but in BTEC-R, it was a lot of carriers. You'd join a fleet. You'd kick out a flight of sentry drones. Depending on your skill would determine how many of them you could launch. You would drone bunny them to a fast locking, usually an interceptor that would just sit right on the undock. And you'd go to work and you'd come home and you might have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 kill mails on a really good day. And those were drone bunnies of the old school. Those were the old, if you hear people talk about boot carriers, that's what that was. Yeah, my first carrier that I got, dude, I'm looking at that. My first carrier that I got, I remember I was, so happy, so excited, got my first carrier. I was looking at the forums for what you needed to carry with it, and I'm just like, fuck, man, the drones cost more than the freaking carrier does. I'm sure that's an exaggeration, but I remember it being a lot because you had hundreds of drones for it. Because again, there's no faxes back then, so your carrier was your capital remote rep. So the carriers had triage modules on them. So you would carry Logi drones. You'd have Small, medium, and large, shield and armor. You would have small, medium, and large combat drones. You'd have sentry drones. You'd have just literally hundreds of drones in a carrier, plus the fighters. Oh, Wing's got a legacy rigged carrier. He's saying, "Yep, I've got a legacy rigged carrier as well." So when you hear somebody say that they've got a legacy rigged, whatever it is, it's either a Dread, a carrier, right, a super, a Titan. I don't know if it could be with a fax. In principle, it could be. If your carrier was legacy rigged, you had a triage module on it, they changed it to a fax. I guess it could be. I'm not sure I've ever seen one, but you got one too? Okay. Um, Makes sense. But basically, there was no capital rigs back then. You would put large rigs on your capitals. Same thing, supers and titans, same thing. They all had large rigs. And so when the capital rigs were introduced, if you still had large rigs on them, CCP did not run a script to change the name of them to capital rig. So you can get, and you can still do this, you can still find them, legacy rigged carriers and dreadnoughts and things like that. And these are just, those ships have the rig on them from before that change was made. So I've got a legacy rigged carrier I picked up from somebody somewhere. Yeah, as was just mentioned in there, frigates with large rigs. Yeah, so back in the day, there was no rig sizes. The very, very beginning, there were rigs. All the rigs were the exact same size. Those rigs became large rigs. And so you could, in principle, have a frigate that has large rigs on it because of that. And then they made another iteration when they added capital rigs. So they've done rigs twice. The original one was just rigs. There was no differentiation between the sizes. Small rigs today and back then went to frigates and destroyers. Medium rigs are cruisers and battle cruisers. Large rigs today are just battleships, and then back then they would be capitals and supers as well. And structures didn't exist, so again, per se, the outposts exist, the pauses existed, but citadels absolutely did not. So all of these rig changes were done years before citadels were put in. Yeah, there's no real reason to put them. It's like the clone grades that we mentioned earlier. When you got a really high clone skill level, um, like I stopped going on fleets in my mains in tackle because like my, even when I was flying a Wolf and assault frigate, let's say it was 50 million ISK and it got killed, and then it would be like 200 million for me to reset my clone grade because when you died, you had to reset your clone grade. So I stopped going on tackle fleets with my mains because it was so expensive every time I died. Every time I got potted, it didn't give a shit about the ship, but every time I got potted. Yeah, yeah, my clone grades were super high at that time because I'd maxed them out. I don't remember what the maximum was, but it wasn't that high. When they put clone grades in, right, that's from kind of the very beginning of Eve. And they like never thought anybody would get like more than 100 million SP or whatever it was. It was some ridiculous number like that. Uh, Crystals, how much did you lose if you forgot that? So it depended on what your skill level was versus what the clone grade was. That difference between the two would be applied to a skill. So a skill level, it just really varied on there. I can't give you an absolute number on it, but yeah, it would just be a variable number on there because it depended on what those levels were. Yeah, up to one skill level. As far as I know, it would never take more than one skill level, but it would usually be a high level skill like FC5 or something like that. So it was bad. It was really funny. You could always tell. I mean, it was a bummer, but you could always tell when somebody forgot because we'd be in a big engagement and somebody on comms would be like "fuck," and you're like, "Oh, they forgot to reset their clone grade." It's about the only time anybody used to say that. I don't think it ever happened to me. I don't think I ever lost a grade on it because it was so common. It happened to so many people. I became like hyper paranoid on it. I don't believe it ever happened to me. Jump clones. Speaking of clones and clone grades, jump clones were a little different back then too. This did happen to me, and I'm sure it happened to at least a few of you. Kind of looking at you, Tig, and you, Doom Lord, uh, where you installed a clone and forgot you already had a clone there and jumped out and fucking killed your implants. Oh yeah, I lost a lot of implants doing that. So back in the day, you could have one jump clone in a station. That's it, just one. So if you had a jump clone in there and you forgot you had a jump clone in there, and then you tried to jump clone to another location, it would replace whatever the current one. It would just overwrite the other one there. And if I recall right, it didn't even give you really a warning. It kind of it used to. They updated it. Now you can have as many clones as you have in one location. Um, but it would pop up this little thing. It was like, "Hey, are you sure you want to do that?" But I don't think it did originally. And yeah, I lost more than one clone that way. And you'd be sitting there. There's actually one of the expansion funny videos is about that, where they're talking about jump clones and everything like that, and you hear somebody just like scream because he's killed a clone like that. Oh yeah, I've done that. Yeah, usually at like a +5 implant set or something like that. You'd be like, "Where's my +5s?" And you look at like your home station where it should be, and you're like, "Why is there a blank clone there?" And you're just like, "Oh god damn it!" Like as you'd been in a fleet, you got back, and you're like, "Oh yeah, let's just you know jump clone over here to do something else." Yeah, and you'd kill a clone. Yeah, implants have been destroyed. Yeah, yeah. That message is actually on that little video. I can't remember which like expansion was it. Maybe the Red Moon Rising expansion. It's not from CCP. It's one of the parody things talking about the expansion, but it actually shows that, and it's not Rick and Morty. It's like a claymation kind of a thing. Talking head. No, it's not the Concord Doken one, but it's in that kind of realm to it. I actually saved the Concord Doken one into my Eve folder because I love that video. And you can tell how old that video is too, because if you look at it, the overview, the way that the screen is shown, when they lock onto something, they're squares, and that's actually how they used to be. They're circles now. When you lock onto a target, they're circles, but they actually used to be squares. And so if you look at that, you're like, why did they make them as squares? Was that an artistic? No, they actually used to be squares. Targeting locks would have a square icon, and they had 3 bars on the top. Shields, armor, hull, just like they do today with it, but they were squares. All right, let me see if that's the right one. to say yes from the first flash. Yeah, this is it. So the one that Doom just linked in there, that's the one. If you guys want to play that, it's talking about the carriers and everything like that, and how CCP's done historically a terrible job of balancing supers. Well, and really carriers and everything like that. But at back in the day, you would never use a couple of the carriers with it. I remember when the Hell became the #1 super in Eve, and everybody's like, "What the shit?" And it's because everybody was using them for super ratting. Like, they weren't really used in combat, but everybody was using them for super ratting. So Hells got super cheap because we were using so many of them. Tig, I honestly don't remember when hacks were introduced. They could with the Red Moon Rising. I honestly don't remember. I've been doing this so long, these dates get super fuzzy, man. I just don't remember. I would totally believe it if that was the case. I just, can neither confirm nor deny on that one. Yeah, my first big fleet engagements. I remember in the IT war, again, we were talking about this when we were taking Fountain. We were actually using Alpha Fleet, which was Maelstroms. And so we were using Minmatar battleships back then, artillery. It was interesting. I enjoyed that fleet. Yeah, the old Baltac fleets. Yep. I never really got into the yacht fleet. That was a little too rich person for me back then. I was a little too much of a poor. Yeah, the rainbow colors. Yeah, Mac fleet. Macarios. That might have been what the Rooks and Kings video that we talked about at the very beginning today. They might have been actually using Macarios. That sounds right. I think they were. But yeah, getting armor. It's a really interesting one when you look at the survivability of armor versus shield fleets with it. Armor logistics occurs right when you're using remote transfer. Armor reps land at the end of the cycle. Shield reps land at the beginning of the cycle, which means that armor hulls are slightly more vulnerable to an alpha strike like that. You've really got to get it because you need the reps to be cycling such that at the end of their cycle, when they apply the HP, right, that bonus repair, because it's at the end rather than the beginning of the cycle. Yeah, either both at the start or both at the end. I mean, obviously, both at the start would be nice. But it's just like make them consistent because it makes armor doctrines harder to use with that. And armor doctrines are slower. That piece I actually kind of like because it gives the trade-off. Right, shield doctrines are larger in signature radius. They're easier to hit. That's because the shield extenders does that. They balloon your signature radius. Armor doctrines don't do that, but they increase your mass. They make you slower. So that trade-off I do enjoy. I like the meta of that. But shield reps landing at the beginning and armor reps landing at the end of the cycle, it's just dumb. I don't know why that is. Just the way CCP did it. It has been that way as far as I know forever. I honestly don't remember when hull reps lands. Anybody know? I haven't used a remote hull rep in so long. I don't know. I think it's the end. Dragon is the end. I would assume so, kind of like the armor reps, but yeah, our armor reps are good. Shield reps are good. Hull reps, fuck that. Back in the day of pause warfare, you'd have modules on the outside of the pause shield. We talked about pauses, how you can't shoot into the shield and you can't shoot out from the shield. And so weapons and things like that would be put on the outside of the shield. And so you would go up and you would ref the modules. You'd ref the structure as well, the tower, the stick also, but you could ref the individual modules on the outside of the shield as well. And what you would typically do, just to be kind of a dick about it, is you would shoot all the way through the shield, you'd shoot all the way through the armor, right? That's what you had to do to bring them into reinforcement. And then you'd shoot like a third of the way through the armor, or 20%, something like that. And if the armor and the shields got to 100%, but the hull was not at 100%, you could not unline it. So you would shoot into the hull, 5, 10, 15, 20%, 30%, depending on how much time you had and what you were doing. And then they'd have to come out and either bring remote armor reps and remote shield reps and remote hull reps, which a lot of people did on the old triage fleets, the old triage carrier fleets. And they'd have to make a choice. Like, okay, are we going to sit here for the next 6 hours and hull rep all of these things? Or do we just kill it ourselves and put a new one? And a lot of people would just kill the module and put a new one down, which led to one of my scariest interactions ever. I was a fairly new capital pilot. We were out triage carriers, and the FC is like, okay, this module on this pause, I think it was a gun, I don't remember for sure, has got hull damage. How much hull damage is it? Can we justify doing this? And there was enough of it that he's like, no, fuck it, we're just going to kill it. So the notification that gets sent is when the module drops to a specific point, there's a notification sent to the owner. And it's whoever shot puts it to the magic number. Doesn't matter how many people are shooting it, they'll only get one notification. It's got one person's name on it, and it was my name. And this guy happened to be online, and he was CEO of the corp, and he's like, what the fuck are you doing to my boss? Because he got a notification as a CEO that I had shot his module. I'm like, the FC told me to do it. I don't remember what CEO that was. I don't even know if he's still playing, but that was many, many years ago. Yeah, the old Dick Stars. We had the old Death Stars. So some of them had just an ungodly number of ECM modules on them. Some of them had huge amounts of weapons on them. It just depended. The control mechanics, so you could take control of the defenses on a pause, but you were limited. There was a skill for it. You were limited to each character, each alt, whatever you want to call it, had a skill that would allow them control, and it was one, module, one thing per skill level up to 5. And you could, just get in there and grab them and do all those kind of things, and they would target them and everything. But it was weird. The mechanic was super awkward. But the big difference between pauses versus citadels today is citadels will only fire if they, it was called star-based defense management. That's the old skill. Citadels today will only fire their weapons if someone is in the gunner's seat. You have to physically take control of it and be in the gunner's seat to fire the weapons. Pauses, you didn't. They would actually shoot and defend themselves. Now, they were terrible about it. It was pretty easy to kite around an unmanned pause. Because like their large guns would be shooting at frigates and their stasis web of fires would be grabbing battleships. You needed a gunner to make it even a token effective, but they could do it. And so the more subcaps you had around the pause, you were pretty much invulnerable, right? They're not going to get you because they would switch every, what was the time frame on that? I think they would automatically switch like every 60 seconds or something. They would switch to a new target. Was it 30 seconds? I can't remember. So the fewer number of attacking hulls there were, the more likely you were that they were going to hold you for longer. Yeah, so Symbiotes was saying in Fleet, a couple people are saying that in Elysium as well. You'd get one or two gunners out there for the pause, and you would basically grab a target, put the webs and disruptors on it, um, and then you'd have another person with the guns, or you would split them. It's like, okay, I'll take 3 guns and a web and a disruptor, and you take 3 guns and a web and a disruptor, right? And you would pick a target, and you guys would just shoot it that way. Yeah, they would generate kill mails, as Proximus is saying. Yeah, you'd get kill mails from it because it was just like a normal gun. Yeah, pauses still do exist. They absolutely are still there. Um, they're not nearly as common as they used to be. They still have some niche uses, but they absolutely do exist. CCP did not remove them from the game. We thought they would when Citadels came out, and CCP strongly said at the time, "Hey, we're going to remove these," and then they never did. Yeah, they came out and said, "Okay, we can't remove them." We thought they might do like a, disable them so you can't anchor new ones or something like that. And you just can't. That Well, let me rephrase it. You still can anchor new ones. We So didn't it break the game? No, not on TQ. They tried it and it went horribly bad. This is when Sissy was still actually useful all the time. One of the funniest things they did is stealth bombers. The bomb launcher on a stealth bomber, when you fire that bomb, it doesn't have a 100% resistance to other bombs of the same type. It's like 99.9%. So you can still kill bombs, right, with fratricide like that, which is why most bombing groups fire in squads of about 10. Because even with max skills, usually 10 bombs is not enough to cause that fratricide with it. And unless you've got an off bomb type, and then you only need one. But CCP was fiddling with something. It was about this time when they were doing this, and they screwed up. And this was on Sissy. It was not on TQ. It was just on Sissy. They screwed up and set the resistance to 100% on bomb types. And I think it was PL got together on Sissy, and they bombed a carrier or a dreadnought with just bombs, and they alphaed it with just stealth bomber bombs because they were able to fire like 100 of them at it at once, and the resistance was literally 100%. So all of those bombs hit it at the same time, and they actually alpha something. It was either a carrier or a dreadnought. There's a video of that somewhere too. I've seen it. I'm sure it's in the depths of YouTube somewhere. Okay, we've been going over an hour. I usually try to keep these to an hour to 90 minutes, so we'll go another 10 minutes or so. Any other prompts for question story time? Yeah, Dragon's talking about the pauses used for wormhole space and moving supers and titans around. Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Getting citadels into wormholes is a little bit tricky. Asset safety doesn't work in wormholes. Mm, nice. Yeah, I see that doing nice. So 22,000 plus currency exchanges. Yeah, always got to deal with currency exchange because we've literally got people around the world. Yeah, oh, bridging titans. That's a good one there, Dragon. So bridging titans out of a pause. Yeah, so back in the day, what you would do is you would have your pause up, you'd have the shield up, and you would bring your titan right to the edge of the pause shield, and then you would cram everybody as close to the edge of the pause shield, and you would set it so that they couldn't go into the shield. Most of the time, it was usually set that way. So they couldn't go into the shield because you didn't want them bumping the Titan out where it would be vulnerable. And then the Titan would basically stick its nose or sometimes its ass out of the shield just enough to allow you to bridge. Yeah, and so we used to bridge off of all that. Blue, so did I get to experience a remote doomsday through a sign out? No, I never had that happen by the time I was playing Eve and in nullsec, that was not a mechanic, but during that point in time, this is kind of Great War era, 2006, 2007 kind of thing, 2008. What you could do is you could fire a Titan Doomsday through a Sino, and they were area effect weapons. They were smart bombs, huge fucking smart bombs. And you would just wipe a fleet entirely, just an entire grid wiped out. Dragon, I honestly don't remember when they changed the remote doomsday thing for it. I honestly don't remember the damage either, but it would apply to everything. So it wasn't like 250,000 HP spread across all of them. It was like everything got 250,000. So it would wipe an entire fleet without question. Everything on that grid died. Yeah, you could tank them to survive, just like you can modern Doomsdays. You can do that to a certain extent. It wasn't easy. Like the Keepstar Doomsday, for instance. Uh, if you fire that at a carrier or a dreadnought or a fax, it's almost certainly going to die, but you can tank them to survive a single DD hit. A single Keepstar DD will not kill a super or a Titan of like any kind. So as part of our memorial last night for Noms, I fired the CJ Keepstar into my Titan, and it took like 8% of the shields on that hit. But like a regular normal carrier or dreadnought or fax, no, they usually will not survive that hit. Funnily enough, Rorquals can. Seen that. Seen Rorquals tank them. Oh yeah, Citadel damage output is a fraction of what it was when they first came out. The Keepstar Doomsday one, yeah, okay, I kind of get it. The PDS on it is annoying. It's not even the ammo on the PDS. Yeah, whatever. It uses ammo now. The nerf to the application, as Dragon saying, the nerf to the application on the PDS means they're pretty much useless now. You can like PDS Dictor bubbles off, and that's about it. You might kill some drones or fighters, depending on if you remember to rig your Keepstar with the appropriate rig for your smart bomb. Sorry, for your PDS, which is a smart bomb, but it's just called a PDS. The biggest change from the Keepstar DD that I liked it back when it was the time, but is the change that Keepstar Doomsdays cannot directly target subcaps. They can bounce to subcaps, but they cannot target a subcap directly. They used to be able to. So now if you want to do it, if you fire a DD into a capital from a Keepstar, just the Keepstar Doomsday does this, it will bounce based on mass. So if you've got a very high mass ship nearby, it will bounce to it. Now, normally that's not the capital, but if it's just subcaps around it, it will bounce to the subcaps. Now, there is a distance, there's a critical distance you must be, and then it just does it by mass. Yeah, PDSs use ammo. They used to just use cap. It used to be super easy to cap out citadels by running the PDS because you just turn the PDS on and you kind of forget that you turned it on, and then you go to like newt something or scram something, and you're like, shit, where's all my capacitor? And it's because you newed it. You basically effectively newed it out in your own citadel. Yeah, cap usage used to be a much bigger thing on citadels. All right, I think I will leave you with this story. This is from the siege of 1DQ time frame. We were not in 1DQ itself, so this is back in, yeah, this would have been spring of 21. So spring of 2021. We are compressed down, right? This is after M2, but we've lost all of our space outside of the 1DQ constellation. We were in, I believe it was 3 Tech D, where they kept trying to drop all those Asbels. We used to call them Asbels, but they're trying to drop all the Asbels because they had a PDS at the time. Again, smaller citadels don't have that. To put a PDS, you needed a large or extra large structure, so you can't put them on Astra houses, but you can on Asbels and Fortizars and things like that. And Asbels were cheaper back then than Fortizars. I don't know if they still are now, but they probably are. Anyways, not important. They were doing all this kind of stuff. We were in the engagement. I was gunning the Keep Star, which was in a terrible place. It was an old crab star. Uh, they knew what the range, like everybody knew what the range on it was. So you had to be at 249.9 kilometers to lock onto something with the Keep Star and get a DD into it. So I'm in the gunner's chair. We've got multiple fleets going on. Asher's running a fleet. And I can see the enemy, and I can't remember who is commanding the enemy fleet, but they were right near Asher. And they're just outside of my range. And so I yell on global to Asher. I was like, Asher, pull those fuckers like 10 clicks closer. He's like, all right. And he did. And I managed to get a DD shot into their Logi wing. And it was hilarious to me because I bounced it through their Logi wing. And even Asher's like, wow, that was a good DD hit. And I was smug. I'll admit. I was pretty smug on that DD hit myself. Chris, I'm not sure what the incident is that you're referring to. BB, no, I did not do that. I have been on the receiving end of bombing from boat with Asher. I have done that. I was commanding Asher's Logi wing one night. We were out somewhere fighting Horde, I think. And as we go through, Asher's like, okay, boat, I need you to hit my fleet because we were mixed in. We were at like point blank range. And Asher likes kiting doctrines. He's not a brawling guy. He's a kiting doctrine guy. He's like, I need you to hit my fleet so we can pull range a little bit. And Boat's like, are you sure? And Asher said, yes. And I swear to God, 11 seconds later, those fucking bombs detonated. And bombs fly for 10 seconds. You know, he had his fleet lined up before he asked for confirmation on that. I told Asher on a command channel because we were using frigates for Logi back then. I was like, Asher, you're gonna wipe our frigates. You're gonna wipe our Logi. He's like, I know. Cool. I'm just telling you. And he did. I don't remember if we won that engagement or not. But yeah, I mean, Boat asked just one confirmation. Are you sure? And he said yes. And then those bombs were detonating. Chris, I have to admit, I don't know what you're talking about. I might, but that is not ringing a bell to me. All right, guys, I think we'll call it good. We've been going about 90 minutes there. Reminder, Fireside is in 2.5 hours. Is my math right? Yeah, 2.5 hours will be at 2300. we'll see you guys for the fireside. Asher is going to be around, so he can tell you guys about all the stuff and things from his perspective. You guys have a good one. I will see you guys. Oh, sorry. Shameless plug. I'm going to do next Saturday, same time, so 1900 next Saturday. I'm going to do another fighters how to. I think I put it in as how to fighters. So if you want to come out, learn to do some fighters stuff, I will be doing that next Saturday. All right, guys. Cheerio. Have a good one. Enjoy your day. Couple hours. We'll see you for the fireside.